Alright, today we're going to show you how to do change the clutches on the new Maverick. And so start off by removing the seat. To do that, it's just pop it out just like you normally would. It helps to lift the seat all the way, or the steering wheel all the way up. Next, we kind of pre-did some of this to speed up the video for you. Pull out all these plastic darts and pull out this inner side panel here. And then there's a few more darts in there that would hold this piece in. And there's a couple down on the side here. And one other thing we did, that once you take them loose, it'll all come out. The only other thing we did is this seat belt is normally bolted in right here. That'll go through, and all you gotta do is, it'll let you get the plastic cover out. You'll just have to unbolt it to get it all the way out of the way. Once you do that, then it's just a matter of going around and undoing all the clutch cover bolts. Again, we got everything loose here. The ones from the bottom, there's a cutout on the skid plate, so they're real nice and easy to get to. If anybody's done this on a Commander, it's pretty much the same way as what a 800 or 1000 Commander would look like. Before you remove that cover, you have to undo the vent tube here. Just a nice easy hose clamp, and that gets you to the clutches. Alright, so now we get where you can see the clutches. This is going to be your primary clutch or your drive clutch. This on the Maverick is the same basic design as the most other Can-Ams, but it's got a few upgrades to it. One is going to be this multiple stack of washers, and these other bolts in here for the wear pads for your sliders and stuff. But other than that, same basic process. This is going to be your secondary clutch or driven clutch, and obviously you got the belt here. We're going to use the OE Can-Am tool here, and this allows you to both loosen the belt so you can get the tension off there, and then allows you to be able to torque the clutch bolts in place right. And it takes a little bit of fiddling around at first just to get it where you want it or where you need it, but it'll pop right in. This threads in, and what this does is this kind of holds it in place and also opens up so you can loosen it for the belt. And what I use this for is the new, starting in like 2010 and newer Can-Ams, they went to a new clutch bolt on the secondary clutches where as you tighten it, it stretches out. And according to the Can-Am service manual, every time you take this off, you're supposed to put a new bolt in. So, just going off their recommendation, if that bolt comes loose, your clutch is going to come off and it's going to fly through your clutch cover and leave you stranded someplace and do some damage. So, going off their recommendation, put a new bolt in here every time you use it and torque it to the factory specs. We'll show you how to do that when we put everything back together. To pull it apart here, so basically just put it on there and then just loosen it up. You don't want to take it all the way off yet, because you want to get the other clutch off, or break the other clutch loose first. So now we're loose, and do the same thing on the primary clutch. These are right hand threads. So now that everything's loose, and back this back out. And then usually the primary clutch one person can do fairly easy. You got to push in. I like to lock my elbow and my arm into the side here and push in. Gives you a good base to push off of. And just unthread this. Otherwise, if you have one person push in, another person pull out, that's good. Just remember there's the stack of washers there. Keep track of those and make sure you don't lose them. And when that comes out, the clutch should come off and it'll pull off just like that. Every once in a while you pull that bolt off, the clutch will stay on there. If you just give it a light tap with a rubber hammer or something, it usually pops. Just have your hand on it ready to catch it. Looking at it from the back side here, your spring will be in there, And these two clutch shafts can come apart, so you just got to be careful there. So we'll set this down on the counter and show you how to change the weights. Alright, so once you get the clutch off, put it on a nice clean surface. We like to always mark it with an X, or you can put a C or whatever you want. Just make sure when it comes apart, you mark it so when you put the two halves together, you're putting them together the same way. But it's pretty simple. Just pull it out. You know, don't bounce around too much because there's plastic pieces here. They normally stay together, but just watch for it. And then you got your 6 clutch weights in here. And then what we'd normally do, oops. So all you gotta do is loosen these up. Again, these Maverick weights are a little bit different than the normal Can-Am that they've been using for the last years and stuff. Just remove this nut, slide the bolt out, and then grab the weight and pull it out. The difference on this weight, oops, and the one stuck in there, is this will have 2 of these plastic washers, one on each side for kind of a bushing and stuff. When you go to put it back together, you got to make sure you reuse those. EPI weights that our prototype weights that we got here, we're actually going to where you don't have to mess with the washers. They're already built into the bushing, so it's a nice, easy, simple way to do it. When you're changing the weights and stuff, you just repeat the same process all the way around. When you go put it back together, if you're using the EPI one, you're just going to slide it in there, put it through the weight, bolt it together. If you are using the stock ones or putting stock ones back in, just make sure you got a washer on both sides. Make sure that bushing is in good shape. And repeat the whole process for all 6 weights. Once you're done with that, it's just a matter of putting the clutch back together. Alright, so when you get all the weights back in, you always just want to make sure they're all moving free. Just pick them up, drop them down. If they're binding up, you know, try to find out if it's a dirty pin or a worn washer or something like that. Fix it so it all works free. And then when you go and put it back together, just make sure your marks line up. Make sure all these black buttons are there and in good shape. And just slide it down. One other thing to do whenever you have your clutch apart, you know, you always want to clean your clutches. If you take a nice piece of light sandpaper, Scotch-Brite, something, you know, light duty, you don't want to put any deep grooves or anything, and just kind of scuff up the clutches from the outside of the clutch to the inside, and just repeat all the way around. And then take a brake cleaner with a clean towel and just wipe it down, get it good and clean. That'll get all the belt glazing off there for you. And do that on the other sheave too, for both the primary and the secondaries. But that, for now, we're pretty much done with the primary, and then we'll take apart the secondary and show you how to do that. Alright, whenever you're working on this, one thing to always remember is this is a little spring cup right here. That'll come off, and that inner bearing will come off. You try to leave that on there. There's little springs back behind there. If they fall out and you don't realize it, you go put everything back together, the clutch isn't going to work right. So just try to keep them good that way. To get your belt off, if your belt's still on there, this is applied in the 2013 Maverick kit. Otherwise, in the EPI Clutch Kit, we do supply a bolt that will do the same job for you, but you just thread it in. There's 3 holes here. Usually one's going to have a threads in it. And what that does is he threads that in, and it opens up the clutch and gets the grip off the belt for you. It'll also, when this belt is loose, you can pull the belt off without pulling that bearing off too. And you don't need to use a big impact ring, you can just do it by hand. It works out pretty easy. That's just usually enough to get it off. Again, whenever you take it off, pay attention. This one has an arrow on it. This is a stock Can-Am belt. You know, most belts will have either an arrow or the wording on them to tell you what direction to put them on. However they come off, put them on the same way. So for some reason, if you put yours on the wrong way the first time, make sure you put it on the wrong way when you go back. Otherwise, if you put a new belt on, try to match the arrow so it's going the right direction. Once that's out, you can back off this. And this one's a little bit tricky. Again, it's under a lot of spring tension, so you got to be careful that nothing gets hurt or pinched or comes flying off at you. And this is again where it helps to have another person there to help you. We loosen this up a little bit. It should come off pretty easy. But what you need is somebody to push on it and another person to back off the bolt. And we'll try to do it and hold the camera on at the same time. But once you pull the bolt out, you just let it come off. And it gets a little tricky with this exhaust on here. Seems a little bit tighter than normal, but you can work it off there. Sometimes you grab the back of the spring and push in while you bring the clutch out. But there's your clutch. There's no really helix in there like you see on other brands. It just kind of slides up and down on those. So you can set that off to the side. Remove your spring. If for some reason this comes off, or whenever you put it back together, there's teeth on the back of this helix, and you just want to make sure whenever it goes back together that that's lined up, and then this one stays on there pretty good. But when you go to assemble it, you want to make sure everything's lined up properly, otherwise you'll have some issues. Alright, so we'll put it back together. Helix is on there. Make sure it's locked on the splines and stuff. Slide your spring in. Grab your clutch. And again, this might take 2 people, or it's a lot easier with 2 people. Slide it on. And basically, one guy's need to push it on. And once you get it turned on there like that, it's alright. It should stay itself on there. Then what you want to do, before you crank that down, you want to thread this back in, and what this does is that opens up that clutch and make sure you got it aligned correctly in the back, because there's, I don't know if you can see in there, but you got the orange helix in there and your clutch. And if you tighten this up and all of a sudden it stops moving, that's going to tell you that you're hitting your helix in the wrong spot. It should be able to open the clutch all the way up. So that's kind of a good safety check for you. It's probably moving slow to tell, but the clutch is actually opening up now. And that's usually there, that's telling me that as much as that's moving, we got it in the right position and we can torque it down. And since I have that in there, we'll slide the belt on. Again, making sure the arrow's going the right direction. Again, trying to be careful not to pull that out too far. And once we're there, then we can, to use the new Can-Am tool, we'll loosen this up. And by holding this belt down there, that's going to hold slack in the belt, and that allows to make sure that the primary clutch is going to go on properly too. Alright, so again, this isn't tightened up yet. We're going to put this on. Make sure it seats in there. Slide the primary clutch on. Make sure you got your stack of washers on there. And then that should get us a pretty good start. And then using the Can-Am tool, you might have to rotate it around just a little bit to make everything line up properly. And again, this one's on the new Can-Ams. It's really important to torque these properly. There's been lots of issues where they're coming off and people are either over torquing them or not torquing them the right way. So what you want to do is the primer is going to get torqued to 89 foot-pounds, just a straight up 89. And that's, no different than what you normally do there. Alright, so we're going to torque it. So we're good and torqued there. Now on this secondary bolt, it's what we said, a stretch bolt kinda, and as it gets torqued, it stretches to its right amount. You're not supposed to use any Loctite or anything else like that. It's supposed to be nice clean threads, and what they tell you to do is to torque it to 15 foot-pounds, and once you do that, you turn it another 180 degrees, which is a half a turn. And so it's kind of a little bit different setup, and for it to work right, you got to do it right. So it just takes a little bit more time and paying attention to what you're doing. But 15 foot-pounds isn't a whole lot. It's actually turning easier than what it is, but we're just kind of fighting the spring right now. Okay, so there we got our 15 foot-pounds. So then what we want to do is we want to do 180 degrees, which is half a turn, which usually you can get about a quarter turn in here. So you just kind of pay attention where it stopped and start, and then kind of go over and redo that again. And that should do it. Once you got that done, you pull your tool off. And then you want to spin this backwards. That's the belt reset. And then you're good to go as far as that part goes, and then it's just putting everything back together. Alright, so the clutches are done, then you just want to make sure, put the cover on, make sure your gasset's good and clean, it's all there. Replace it if you need to. It's just a matter of lining it up and start putting all the bolts in. And once you get all those in, you want this front vent tube. Make sure you plug that back in and put the clamp back on. Sometimes it can be kind of a pain to get to. Put your clamp on, tighten it up. Alright, so clutch cover's on, vent tube's back on. Put this plastic in, make sure you route your seat belt line through the bottom here. Put all your plastic darts back in and put the side panel in. And then it's pretty much good to go. It's just a matter of throwing the seat in and going out and ride.